dreaded moment when someone asks if you can kind of do a comparison shooting out a UA pedal and the HX Stomp. So hopefully this gives some sort of insight into how these things sound next to each other. This isn't, you know, obviously I don't have a real Dumble to compare it to, so let's not go bonkers with that. Roughly how I can get these units to sound without too much tweaking, going through the same cab, because I'll explain why a bit later on actually, if you're confused as to why that might be.
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
Let me know which you preferred in the comments. I think, in general, each time I do this sort of thing, I am, in general, able to get at least close with the HX Stomp. But I think, in quite a lot of cases, this takes the edge for me. I think, personally. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I found that the clean channel of this wanted to be a little bit on the darker side. And not the easiest amp model in the world to dial in either case. And I think that might be something that you might have noticed like across some other videos as well. It's like, it might not be kind of your idealized. Both very in-depth models. I think this one takes the edge for being slightly more tweakable in terms of being able to change out for 4 different kind of power supplies. So I think you take the edge there. This, you could obviously change the sag And I think this also takes the edge for actually being based on a real Dumble, whereas this is based on a clone of a Dumble, which I think is fair enough. But definitely some very usable tones in the Helix model. I actually used the Grammatico GSG100 model live for like a pedal platform that goes to front of house. That's one of the models that I use basically on most gigs when I'm using an HX Stomp. So what I did on the Enigmatic was turn it onto the squishier setting, because I kind of preferred the way initially that the Grammatico was feeling. Now the Grammatico is, of course, the model is based on an amp which is based on a Dumble, so it's kind of like one step removed from a Dumble. Most of us will have never played a Dumble. I know Wayne, if you're watching, has. He owns two. I do get a few messages from folks that do own Dumbles. I've got friends that have played Dumbles. My good buddy Jake has played like 3. And what he has said is they are the best amps really that he's ever played. You know, like he's played the Fractal stuff, and you know, playing like a model of one of these things, I think doesn't really hit the spot particularly. If you look at on that pedal show, you know, Jake has played through Robin Ford's actual amplifier. I think one of the key things is that in the room with it, he said it sounds like hi-fi wherever you're stood in the room, and that, you know, of course the volume is incredible. He equally did say that he'd seen Robin play with it live at Ronnie Scott's with it at a quieter volume, and it didn't sound great there. So I think one of the key things with this kind of the great Dumble tones is they come at a really high volume, and unless we probably push some of this stuff through like a really loud cabin, that sort of thing, maybe we don't get half of the experience. Talking of Dumble tones and talking of that pedal show, Ariel Posen, I think, is on that pedal show today or yesterday, depending on when I put out this video. Ariel Posen actually has a few courses on TrueFire. I wanted to just mention these. TrueFire sponsor the channel. You could use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of Ariel or anyone else's courses on TrueFire, so 40% off with JNC40. And you could also use the code JNC100 if you were to use that on their All Access membership, the All Access Pass, that you can get access to all of their courses, so like over 85,000 courses on there for $100 less than they normally sell that for. So JNC100 for that. But yeah, Ariel Posen's got courses on TrueFire that you might want to check out if you're a fan of his playing, particularly some stuff around sort of storytelling when you're playing a solo. I think that's a really cool thing. I will say of these two, I think I actually prefer what I dialed in on the Enigmatic. That was basically using the squishy and controls basically at halfway. This is HX Stomp. Enigmatic. It's kind of got a little bit more glassiness to it. And I don't think it's just because it's slightly louder at the moment. So if I... HX Stomp this is. And to me, this seems like the sort of difference that you might actually have between two amps. You know, one that is twice removed from a Dumble, and I think UA actually were modelling on a Dumble which they had. So that's kind of what I could show you guys. This is without like tons and tons of tweaking, like roughly what the Grammatico GSG wants to kind of sound like. I'll show you the settings, and roughly what the Enigmatic wants to sound like with the gain at sort of like 7.5 around there. Is this the most perfect example of the Dumble tone? Probably not, but like I've been saying in some comments, like basically I think of an ODS as more or less something like a Mezzo Boogie Mach 2 or 3, where actually it's got a whole ton of like tones. It's a super versatile amplifier, from super crystal clean to a ton of gain with the cascading gain, and it's kind of like, well, Dumble ODS in particular can sound like basically anything. and you think of someone like Pearl Jam, for instance, does that scream to you Dumble tone? Because he was using Dumbles on the latest album. And, you know, yeah, just one of those things. So hopefully this helps somewhat. In case you're wondering like why you would keep a cab the same for this comparison, it's because you get really two stark differences to be able to actually dial in tones to be close to one another, and you probably are not really even comparing the amp modelling, you're more comparing like the sounds of two different cabs. So for example here I'm switching between the Enigmatic let's just change to a different cab here. So now I'm on, I think, the EV. So that's HX Stomp. Put in some more room sound. Enigmatic. It's too stark a difference to really as you'll know from miking up amps and cabs, like it can make a really drastic difference. So just sticking with the Enigmatic now, I'm not changing anything except for the cab. Switch to HX Stomp. Cab again on the Enigmatic. HX Stomp. So some of these are quite nice. Enigmatic, HX Stomp. So hopefully that HX Stomp, Enigmatic, it can really change, certainly for me, my opinion on whether I prefer one or the other, but for the sake of actually comparing the amp modelling, which I think is, you know, what I want to do here. Keep that cab the same, then it's easier to tell what those differences might be. So that's, you know, just a little bit of maybe a tip for comparing this stuff. That's why we tend to use the same IR, because it's actually much easier to tell then when you're comparing the difference between a cab or you're actually comparing the difference between amp modelling. You can't really compare amp modelling too much with separate cabs. I hope that makes sense. I think there is an opinion that the UA cabs are potentially some of the better cabs out there. I think that's probably fair to say that some people really like them. I myself I quite like being able to position a cab around a microphone, which the UA stuff cannot do as much and can't load third-party IRs. So, but you knew what you were getting into with the Enigmatic game anyway, presumably. But yes, I think the Enigmatic holds up well with both Fractal and HX Stomp, and I think in some cases I might even prefer the Enigmatic. So for me, I think that's a very strong model that they've made there. Personally, And I guess if you're looking for Dumble tones in a box, I think this is not a bad choice at all. Likewise, the HX Stomp kind of does a good job of it as well, I think, roughly. In terms of settings on the amp here, so drive at about 5, bass at 4, mids, treble and presence at about 5, and then master at about 4. Mid switch off, we're using the rock switch. The OD switch comes on for the drive. The drive here at about 9.2, OD level at 4.4, bright switch off, FE2 boost off, and the preamp bypass off. Although that can get you a bit more gain and a bit more level, so worth experimenting with the preamp bypass on or off.